Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. Here are 15 of my more poignant stories from my various books, each about 2 minutes long. The first story is called Can an Old Dog Learn a New Trick? Starting way back when I was a puppy, my owner, Bill, tried to teach me to fetch. I'd go after the tennis ball, but it was in my genes to stay where the ball is and not bring it back. You see, over the millennia, hunters bred dogs for sense of smell, so the dogs could smell the poor animal that the hunter shot far away, go to the spot and wait so the hunter could easily find his damn trophy. I love Bill, and so I want to please him. I knew he wanted me to bring the ball back when he kept saying, bring it back, buddy. But it's hard, very hard to triumph over your genes. But then there was today. We were at the field, and as usual, Bill tossed the ball, closer than in years past because I can't run as far. Actually, I can't run at all. Waddle is more like it. He said, as usual, bring it back, buddy. Not because he thought I would. It was just a habit, somehow comforting, I think, to both of us. But this time something happened. I'm old now, and maybe it's that I've become too tired to follow my genetic predisposition. Or maybe it's that over the years my love for Bill has gotten so deep that it trumps the genes. So when I got to the ball, as usual, I started to lie down with it. But when Bill said, bring it back, buddy, I forced myself to put it in my mouth and took a step toward him. Bill exclaimed, good buddy, good buddy. That made me take another step, a faster one. Again he exclaimed, good buddy, the best buddy. And I actually started to trot and made it all the way to him where I dropped the ball at his feet. And because I was tired, I also dropped at his feet. He cried, I love Bill, and he loves me, forever. Who says you can't teach an old dog new tricks? So that story is called, Can You Teach an Old Dog New Tricks? The next story is called, No One's Gonna Hurt You, Not While I'm Around. This is after the book The Road by Jack Kerouac in honor of my friends Ron and Janine Kraft. I decided to take my 12-year-old on a walking tour of Oakland. Not the small middle-class part in which I live, but the people's part. My kid is wonderful, although his questions could drive even Mr. Rogers crazy. I guess I should have expected it. We're Jewish, atheist, but Jewish in style, so we live for questions and debate. We passed the graffiti train station and Adam asked, isn't it wrong for them to do that? I said probably, but there are worse sins. The trains still run. It's a chance for alienated teens, that's a fancy word for people who feel hopeless, to self-express publicly without a single person being hurt. Naturally, he followed up. Does doing graffiti make him more or less likely to beat people up? As I too often have to say to him, I just don't know. We then passed a homeless encampment, a trail of tents, sleeping bags, and refuse, blocks long. He asked, why are they there? I said, different reasons, drug problem, can't find a job, mental illness. Why doesn't somebody do something about it? The government tries, nonprofits try, people try. Some problems don't have easy answers. And that's when the earthquake, the big one, hit. We were under an underpass staring at more graffiti and giving $1 to a homeless person when everything shook and shook and shook and crumbled, including the homeless person. We barely avoided a huge section of freeway that had plummeted. Instantly, all was gray except for the fires everywhere. Adam said, Daddy, would you sing that song to me, No One's Gonna Hurt You? I continued, not while I'm around. We knew we couldn't last if we breathed that air, so we grabbed the shirt from the dead man, tore it in half, and put it over our mouths. We started walking, not sure why or where. Fortunately, before long, we found a COVID mask and then another. Never would I have thought I'd feel grateful that someone tossed their used COVID mask on the sidewalk. Every building was collapsed to rubble. We assumed everyone had been killed. We walked and we walked in search of a sound, of people, nothing, and then a building. We sped toward it, a church. In its basement were people scared but having supper. Yes, the cliched baked chicken and Jell-O mold. They raced to greet us and we them. They said, let us pray. And we did. So that story is called No One's Gonna Hurt You. This one is called Sam's Last Concert. Sorry for my hoarseness. In the wings, Sam could hear the concertmaster tuning up the orchestra. Damn, my hand is shaking more than usual. It's a bad Parkinson's day. Plus, it's my last concert. I'm nervous. Glad I decided on the Grieg, but with these hands, nothing's easy. Sam had been a concert pianist his whole life. At age 11, he finished fourth in the Midwest Regional Young Artists Competition, and now at age 83, had performed 45 concerts, including one with the Kansas City Symphony. He thought, true, that was just in the KC Symphony Summer Festival when lots of the A players were on vacation, but still. Somehow I wish my ex-wife were here. How could she have dumped me? I still wish she were here tonight. Do I play it safe? A lot of note mistakes would make the audience think I stayed at it too long, like those star baseball players who'd rather hit 200 than retire. Or do I go for a home run, a chance at a write-up in the Kansas City Star? Roseman finishes with a flourish. The conductor gave Sam a forced smile, and Sam strode on stage. This is it. Deep breaths, deep breaths. Damn, my hands are shaking more. I'm taking too long. I gotta get out there. Stand up straight. Old men hunch. Stride. Don't shuffle. But Sam could manage only to shuffle on stage. He hung onto the piano with one hand as he bowed his head to the audience. If I tried to bow from the waist, I could fall. And he sat down at the piano. I've had this moment so many times, but this is different. Sam used his old trick of adjusting the seat up and then back down again, not because it needed adjusting, but to buy a little more time to ground himself before the moment of truth. And Sam began, and took every reasonable risk he could, and most of the time he won. Yeah, his boldness caused a few note mistakes, but only the ignorant or mean-spirited could criticize his exciting performance. It was inspiring at any age, but for an 83-year-old with advanced Parkinson's, it gives me the chills just to tell you about it. And yes, Sam got not just the usual obligatory extended applause, bestowed as much to protest classical music's dying as to acknowledge the performer, but fervent applause, and then, yes, a standing ovation. Not a charity ovation, a heartfelt one. And Sam, who usually was too shy to look at the applauding audience, and so would stare at the back walls, soaked in the smiling, standing people. Then he sighed and plodded off stage for what he thought was the last time. Sam shuffled into his dressing room, closed the door, and dropped into a chair. I survived. I didn't embarrass myself, but I can't go to the reception. That's like a retirement party where everyone tries to make light of it being the beginning of the end. My end. There was a knock on the door. Daddy! His daughter opened the door and goes, You were amazing! You were really amazing! Come on! They're all waiting for you! Sam knew there was no avoiding it, so he trudged downstairs. When he arrived, the chatter morphed into applause. He thought, no one likes long speeches and nothing ungracious. I should be a good boy. But he couldn't resist saying what he really felt. Honestly, I can't stand the thought that this will be my last performance. And he teared up. A 4-year-old toddled up to him. You want to play in my class? And Sam Roseman went on to play more concerts than he had in his entire life, in preschools and elementary schools, first just locally, then around the country. He never got paid, indeed had to pay his travel expenses, but didn't begrudge it. I can't think of a better way to spend my money than to teach young kids to love classical music and that old people aren't necessarily irrelevant. Anyway, that's Sam's last concert. Next story, a dog's search for his father. I lived with my mother until she died at age 13. That's around 90 in human years. Now I'm alone, 11, and a male, so I probably won't live that long. I never knew my father and hadn't really cared to. As far as I knew, he was just some German Shepherd mix that my mum hung out with in the Vale. But now, aware of my mortality and feeling lonely, I decided to try to find my father. I figured I would start with the only obvious place where I was born, the Vale. There I met an owl. I described what my dad probably looks like. My mom had told me. And the owl said, I think I know who you're talking about. There's a crotchety, very old dog who lives in the cave over there. I peered inside and was met with a weak growl. The dog looked like I imagined he would, but older. He crept out, teeth bared, and he wheezed, What do you want? I asked, Did you hang out with a shepherd mix many years ago? I did. We felt good roaming together and we slept in this cave. I can't be sure, but I think I'm your son. Quieter, tireder, now that he wasn't on alert, he whispered, I think I can see myself in you. And he lay down. I toddled over, rested my feet on his belly, and he sighed. That's a dog's search for his father. This one's called My Hijab. My husband and I had just finished Maghrib, the fourth of our five daily prayers, and then we were, well, intimate. I figured this was a good time to ask whether, now that we're in America, I might wear a headscarf instead of the formal hijab. His face tightened a bit and said, "We're not that liberal yet. But good news, my friend manages the gift wrapping department at Macy's. He's willing to hire you for the holidays. It'll give us extra money for Ramadan gifts." I was nervous. While I gift wrapped adequately for presents I give, but to do it professionally? But I said yes. On my first day, I was reminded that most department store gift wrappers are old. I'm 26 and wear a hijab. I could tell they were trying. They smiled, albeit maybe a forced smile. I was relieved that it wasn't hard to add flourishes that make gift wrapping look professional. For example, to get the curling ribbon to look good, you put the scissor on the ribbon's dull side and do its full length in one shot. It was fun for a while, but the luster soon wore off. One woman noticed my smiling less, came over during the break and asked, "How are you?" It felt more than the obligatory, "Hi, how are you? Fine. How are you? Fine." I explained that I was getting a little bored and said that my hijab seemed to distance people. That disclosure gave her the courage to ask, "Well, had you considered wearing a regular scarf?" I explained that my husband doesn't want me to, and she backed off. Just before the store was closing on Christmas Eve, we exchanged gifts, well wrapped, of course. When my turn came, it was a gorgeous silk scarf. I got teary and, a little angry at the woman and spurted, "But I told you my husband won't let me." At that moment, my husband popped out from the supply closet and smiled. "Merry Christmas." That's called my hijab. This next one's called the Basement Club. I love sports, which is cool, but I also like reading, which isn't. Even worse, I like reading aloud and being read to. When I admitted that to another kid, he said, "That's for babies," and that shut me up. But I had an idea, a read-aloud club. What if I asked a couple of kids who I guess might like reading aloud? I guessed wrong a couple times. For example, I would have thought that the kid who always wear political T-shirts would like it, but he just shrugged and asked if I was coming to the protest. I tried a shy girl, figuring she might be bookish, but she just said, "No thanks." But then I realized an obvious choice, Bella, who at recess usually sits on a bench reading. She said, "I'll try it." I thought 3 kids would be enough for a club. Who'd make a good third member? We have the bookworm and me, the jock. So I thought about the cool kids and asked one who surprised me. He said, "Cool, I'm in." We agreed the best time to meet would be on a Saturday morning at 11, when all of us would be awake and our parents wouldn't ask too many questions about where we were going. We could have met in one of our houses or even outside, but we thought it was more adventurous and would get us a huge number of books to try if we broke into the school library. So at 11 that Saturday, we walked around the outside of the school building and checked all the windows. All were locked except one, a small window leading to the basement, where the boiler room and the janitor's desk are. I guess the janitor leaves it unlocked because it's too small for a grown-up to crawl through, or maybe to make it easier for the janitor to open the window to let out the heat from the boiler room. But we were just 5th graders, so we were small enough to fit through. Well, 2 of us were. I was a little too big, but the other 2 pushed my ass through. I made it, barely. We figured that on Saturday no one would be there, but as soon as we got in, the janitor raced in. "What the hell are you doing?" We explained. His face softened, and he said, "I'll let you use this room under one condition. If I can join your club." I smiled and said, "Okay, if you read the first excerpt, whatever you want." The janitor opened his desk drawer, pulled out a short story called The Jokester Janitor, and read this excerpt. "I'm a janitor, but could I add some spice to my life? I Googled how to be a stand-up comedian, and soon I was doing open mic nights as the Jokester Janitor. That's provided the spice, and at parties, when they ask what I do, I can say I'm a stand-up comedian. That's a conversation starter. When they ask if I can do a bit for them, I oblige. For example, I was looking for a new janitor job and was late for my job interview. I overswept. A few of my janitor friends formed a band, the Bleach Boys. When I got sick of being a janitor, I tried to get into NASCAR, but they rejected me because my car went broom, broom. So I got a job as a garbage man, but was worried there was no training. The boss said, "You'll pick it up." Now, how rich am I? Filthy rich. Now it was my turn. I admitted that, like the janitor, I didn't have the patience for books, but liked short stuff, especially about sports. So I had brought Red Smith's description of a National League playoffs last game. So it was the Dodgers ball game, 4-1, and the Dodgers pennant. So all right, I better get started and beat the crowd home. That stuff in the ninth inning, that didn't mean anything. A single by Al Dark, a single by Don Mueller, Irvin's pop-up, Lockman's run double. Now the corniest possible sort of Hollywood schmaltz. Stretcher bearers plodding away with an injured Mueller between them, symbolic of the Giants themselves. Out went pitcher Newcomb, and in came Ralph Branca. Who's at bat? Bobby Thompson. Branca's first pitch was a strike. The second, well, when Thompson reached first base, he turned and looked toward the left field stands. Then he started jumping straight in the air again and again. Then he trotted around the bases, taking his time. Ralph Branca turned and started for the clubhouse. Bella, the bookish, read the first couple paragraphs from the book, Never Let Me Go. It's about people who are cloned so they can donate organs. The person speaking to the reader is a carer who cares for organ donors after they've donated. Donors usually just last 2 or 3 donations before they die. Here's the excerpt. My name is Kathy H. I'm 31 years old, and I've been a carer now for over 11 years. That sounds long enough, I know, but actually they want me to go on for another 8 months. That'll make it at almost 12 even. Then I'll become a donor. I do know they've been pleased with my work. My donors have tended to do much better than expected. Their recovery times have been impressive, and hardly any of them have been classified as agitated, even before the 4th donation. It means a lot to me, being able to do my work well, especially that bit about my donors staying calm. I've developed a kind of instinct around donors. I know when to hang around and comfort them, when to leave them to themselves, when to listen to everything they have to say, and when to just shrug and tell them to snap out of it. Cool Dude was the last reader. He chose an excerpt from the book The Fault is in Our Stars. He took a deep breath, getting up the courage to read when there was a loud knock. Police, open up! We explained what we were doing. The janitor nodded, and in a stroke of genius, asked the cop if he'd like to see. The cop stared at us, scared, innocent-looking. He sighed, and Cool Dude began. Late in the winter of my 17th year, my mother decided I was depressed, presumably because I rarely left the house, spent quite a lot of time in bed, read the same book over and over, ate infrequently, and devoted quite a bit of my abundant free time to thinking about death. Those words came from 16-year-old Hazel Grace Lancaster, who continued, Whenever you read a cancer booklet or website or whatever, they always list depression among the side effects of cancer. But in fact, depression is not a side effect of cancer. Depression is a side effect of dying. Cool Dude teared up, we all did, even the cop, who, when he gathered himself, said, Okay, let's just say the janitor let you in, and wiping a tear, patted out more like a perp than a cop. We've just scheduled our next meeting and wonder if we should invite the cop. So that story is the Basement Club. Now, knitting. After I got laid off at age 70, I tried to find work, but could get no better than a part-time minimum wage job as a library page. Despite years of psychotherapy, meditation, mindfulness, and so on, I found the only way to keep my anxiety under control was to stay busy, distracting attention from my real and imagined woes. I was never an athlete and had no desire, for example, to take up golf, that staging area for the hereafter. Nor did I want to attend activities at a senior center that would too acknowledge my place on life's conveyor belt. Watch more TV? Waste of time. I like to be productive, but at what? I never was arty, so other cliches were out. For example, the old man at his easel or wandering around with an outside zoom lens, creating the zillionth image of nature's eye candy. I flashed on my mother knitting a sweater. Too hard, too feminine. Can you just see me in a knitting circle? So I dismissed the idea, but knitting kept intruding. It's too hard. I'm retarded at visualizing. Maybe if it was just a scarf, that's just a rectangle, no changed angles. Maybe I should watch a YouTube video. And I did, but couldn't even get the basic knit and purl move. If I took a knitting class, it would be embarrassing, not just being a man, but I'd be so bad at it. Should I hire a tutor? I'm sure some little old lady would come to my house. No, we'd have to meet on a park bench. She might think I'm a rapist or something. I thought about placing an ad for a tutor on Craigslist, but figured that little old ladies who knit are more likely to see a note hung on a yarn store's bulletin board, if they have bulletin boards. Thorough, I went to 3 knitting stores. 2 did have bulletin boards, and the other allowed me to tape my note to the cash register counter. Not so old man, inept with crafty things, wants to see if he can learn to knit. Seeking a patient tutor, 510-122-2376. I returned home to find a message on my answering machine. Yeah, I still use an answering machine, not because I don't know how to set up voicemail, but because I like to screen calls. The message I received: "Hello, I'm Marty Atkinson. The owner of A Good Yarn phoned me to say you were looking for someone to show you how to knit. You're welcome to come to my apartment." I thought, well, there are 4 widows for every widower. Maybe she's eager. Feminist assertiveness has reached the senior set. So I went to Marty's apartment, where I saw why she was so forward. She's bedridden with MS. I was slow to pick up even basic knitting moves, but Marty was indeed patient. In showing me, increasingly, she seemed to hold my hand just a fraction of a second longer than required. And then one time, she held it for a full second. I looked her in the eye, then, reminded I was on her bed, turned away, until once I didn't. And Marty and I met weekly for knitting lessons. Before long, I had made 6 scarves and sewed a label in each, "Made with Love" by Albert and Marty. That's called knitting. Next story is called A Dog Named Yes and a Dog Named No. Hi, my name is Yes, and I used to be a cute dog, but now, having roamed the streets of Oakland for 5 months, I'm matted and infected all over with foxtails. I'm a mess. I don't blame my owners for having dumped me. I couldn't stop chewing their slippers, their sofa leg, even their electric toothbrush. So this is my lot in life, or so I thought. Then I met a dog I call No. I do that for a good reason. I'm a positive doggy and don't like to be critical. Every other dog I met was nice, but No, everything was black. I mean, we even saw this great bone. It must have been a barbecued rib. I toddled to pick it up, and No said, "It could be rancid, even poison, don't." I figured the chances were great the bone was just fine, and the person just wasn't civic-minded, and so he tossed it on the street. I started chewing as No cringed. His loss. It was wonderful. Then a truck pulled up. I had seen lots of trucks before, beer trucks, sausage trucks, but this one had a sign I didn't understand: Animal Control. A man and a woman got out of the truck, came up to me, and I was sure they wanted to pet me, but No screamed, "Run away! They're going to trap you, take you to the pound, and kill you!" I didn't believe it, but this time No was right. The woman slipped this metal thing around my neck, pulled it tight, and threw me into the back of the truck. No started to run away, but the man got him too. I was scared, and No was terrified. And we got even more scared when we got to this gray building. It didn't look friendly. When we got inside, there were lots of dogs in cages, barking, whining, yelping. Was No right? Will we all get killed? The woman threw us both in the same cage. We saw 3 other dogs in the next cage, and that made me feel good. At least we weren't the only doggies there. The next day, we saw that one of the doggies was gone, and No said, "See?" And the day after, another dog was gone. But the one with the nice terrier in it was still there. Later that day, a woman walked by with a man. He looked at us, and I put my paws on the front of the cage and wagged my tail, and he said, "May I look at her?" But No growled, and the man said, "Never mind. May I look at that terrier?" The terrier wagged her tail and looked up at the man, and the man asked, "May I take her for a test walk?" The woman nodded, put the terrier on a leash, and they were off. I didn't see him again, so I'm guessing she got adopted. No said, "I'm sorry," I growled. I showed him that I forgave him by licking his face. 2 days later, even I was getting very scared we might get killed. But a nice couple walked by. Again, I put my paws on the front of the cage and wagged my tail as wildly as I could, and this time, No stayed quiet. The woman pointed to me and said, "That dog seems nice." And the woman opened the door. I was happy, so happy, and nuzzled against his leg and then his wife's. He cried, looked at his wife who nodded. She said, "Sweet doggy, you now have your forever home." I was so happy, but what about No? Part of me wanted to stay with No. He needs it, yes, but I couldn't resist having a new home, maybe a forever home. So I toddled over to No, lifted my paw onto his face, kissed him, and said goodbye. Next story is called Venus and Iris, a children's story, but not really. It's available as a watercolor illustrated book, if you search on that, Venus and Iris. Deep in the bog, with the cicadas singing, there was a flytrap named Venus. He was just old enough to start noticing things like that he had red traps. He thought they were ugly and wished they were green like the rest of them. He also noticed things outside himself. He looked to the left, just some flytraps and some brush. He looked to the right, just some flytraps and some peat. He looked ahead, just some flytraps and lots of bog. But then he looked behind, and there was an iris. She was beautiful, the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. It's hard for flytraps to talk, especially young ones, but he summoned all his energy and croaked, "Hi?" Iris stared at Venus's traps, and even though they were small, those teeth, she got scared and so looked away. Embarrassed and sad, he turned away too. Days passed, and every so often an insect would fall into Venus's trap, and as soon as it touched 2 of the trap's trigger hairs, the trap slammed shut. Well, a boy growing boy's got to eat. And the boy grew bigger. Every so often he would look at Iris, but the bigger he got, the scarier he looked, and the faster she turned away. And so he did too. Then one day there was loud buzzing. Beetles! He looked at Iris. She was covered with beetles. They were eating her. Venus widened his traps and squeezed really hard, so lots of the glistening, attractive dew sat on his traps, and it worked. A beetle jumped off Iris and right onto his trap. Snap! Dinner is served. Even though fly traps find it very hard to speak, love makes almost anything possible. So he tried to speak, but alas, all that came out was digested beetle. He tried again. More digested beetle. He tried again, and finally words came out. Please help me save my Iris. But the fly traps didn't move. Please, he cried. The fly traps remained still. He screamed, I love her more than life itself. And that moved the fly traps. Suddenly, most of them squeezed as hard as they could. Their traps opened as wide as they could, covered with that glistening, attractive dew. Like a magnet, the beetles jumped into the traps. Well, most of them. One beetle was still left on the now wilted Iris. Now what? Venus couldn't eat the beetle himself. He had just eaten one and remembered what his mother had warned him. Eat more than one in a day and you'll die. But Venus looked at Iris and knew what he had to do. He squeezed harder than he ever had in his entire life, and then he squeezed some more. And all his traps opened the widest they'd ever been, even wider than you do when the doctor tells you to say, ah. And all his traps were covered with that glistening, attractive dew. And just like that, the last beetle jumped from Iris and into his trap. Snap! Venus looked at Iris and he was happy. And this time she did not look away. She leaned toward him, and Venus was happy. But then Venus felt sick and wondered, should I have eaten that beetle? The boy's red traps turned green, a sickly green. If you were Venus, would you have eaten that beetle? Iris knew that if she used her body to shield Venus from the sun for a day, he would live. But she, who can only live in shade, would likely die. If you were Iris, what would you do? Okay, that's Venus and Iris. The next story is called Puff the Sequel. In the song Puff the Magic Dragon, the boy grew up, went away, and Puff that mighty dragon sadly slipped into his cave. A few months later, by that sea in a town called Honolulu, the girl, who was picking up seashells by the seashore, saw a cave. Scared but more curious than scared, peeked inside and then took another step, then another, and more steps, and then she saw, sleeping, Puff. Puff opened his eyes and the girl took a step back. But Puff whimpered and she stopped. Puff gave her the kindest, most grateful look. After all, it had been months since the boy left for college. The girl took a step toward Puff, and Puff smiled, so she took another step, and then Puff swished his tail toward her. She backed away, but Puff whimpered again, and she stopped. Gently, Puff wrapped his tail around her. She worried, will he crush me like a boa constrictor? But her intuition said no, and Puff, of course, didn't crush her, but merely gave her a Puff hug. And so, as Puff had with the boy, they frolicked in the autumn mist. But soon it was time for the girl to go to college. And so, as the boy did, she hugged Puff and left. And the dragon bowed his head, crept into his cave, and cried. But soon the girl returned. She missed Puff, but this time, rather than frolic on the beach, she took his mighty paw and brought him, using Allied van lines, to college. Of course, on campus, everyone was terrified, and campus security sounded the sirens. But the girl explained, whereupon security said, there's only one place on campus will allow a trial hour, the safe space. Puff more than passed the trial, and within a month replaced the chicken as the college's mascot. Puff pranced before, at halftime, and at the end of every winning football, basketball, and even volleyball game. The college even renamed the stadium, without even, like most, naming rights requiring a donation. The stadium would evermore be called Puff the Magic Stadium. Anyway, that's called Puff the Sequel. This next one is called Good Deed. Hey, Dominic, give me the big one. Yeah, that one in the corner. That's what got me started. I used to give just people the next slice in the pie, but then I thought, I'd personalize it. I'd give the big guys the biggest slice, the skinny ones a little slice, those size 2s who want to stay tiny. And if I wasn't sure which piece they wanted, I'd ask them. And if I liked them, I'd throw on a piece of sausage, mushroom, whatever, like as a gift. They loved that, so I started putting a piece on everyone's slice. The owner didn't mind. It cost him almost nothing and got him more customers. I think some people actually bought a second slice to see what I'd put on it. When they knew I'd be doing that, they made requests. But I refused to put pineapple on it. It is a sin to put pineapple on pizza. I'd have to go to confession, which I do not like to do. After a while, like the bartender at Angelo's down the street, I knew people's regular order, like Vito, pepperoni, Carmela, mushrooms, Jose, olives. I did that for like 20 years. I am not the ambitious type. But when Carlo, he's the owner, said he was tired and asked me if I wanted to buy the business, I said, "You crazy? I can't afford nothing with the wife and 3 kids. Thanks, but no thanks." But I told Salmonte, he's a regular, that I felt good that Carlo had offered me it. And Carlo hung around the store, and everyone who came in, he said, "Hey, Carlo's tired. You want to give 50, 100, 500 so Dom could buy the store?" I couldn't believe it, but Sal raised $9,250. Carlo had wanted 10 grand. But Carlo said, forget about it, as long as you change the name from Carlo's Pizza to Dom's Pizza. So for the next 20 years, I ran Dom's Pizza. But I'm old now, and I gave the business to Maria, who's been working here now for 5 years. As I gave her the deed to the business, she said, "Good deed. That's funny, right?" I hope she changes the name to Maria's Pizza. Anyway, that's Dom's Pizza. Next story is an old wolf talks to us. There once was a wolf who had always been the smartest and meanest in the pack. For example, he won the Lone Wolf Award for killing the most sheep solo, no wolf pack, 23 sheep. But while attempting his greatest feat, trying to down a cow solo in the November of his years, the farmer shot the wolf, rendering him a quadriplegic. The wolf speaks to us now from his den. "I feel pretty good about how I've lived my life. I've lived up to my lupine potential. Sure, occasionally I felt a little sad for the sweet sheep. I recognize they're nicer animals than I am, but I can't be what I'm not. My genes consign me to be an apex predator. Of course, I too am prey. Bears love us, tigers order us for their main course. And then there are the humans. I can't really blame people. After all, our main course is their livestock, their livelihood. And so it goes. Now I wait out my days, wolfing down easy prey, old or sick mice, rats, rabbits, and my favorite, deer. And I spend a lot of time thinking. My favorite thought is that I'm not that far removed from a dog. Dog's life, stretched out, snuggling warm and completely safe in a human's bed, and then, only when I feel like it, I get up, and not have to fight for food, but just look longingly at my person, who unfailingly responds by filling my bowl. Yeah, dogs actually have a bowl for their food, with nuggets perfectly tailored to their dietary needs and preferences. I also wonder if there's wolf heaven, with the pearly gates not manned, but of course, wolfed. Would I get into heaven? Maybe killing so many sheep make me a bad wolfie, and then it would be down to wolf hell, where I'd never get to eat anything better than old sick mice. But mainly I feel just sorry for myself. I can't believe I lost out to a truly inferior wolf for the 3 Little Pigs gig. I could have blown down that damn house and I would have been famous. Not just a big bad wolf, the biggest, baddest wolf. But here I sit in my cave, just another woulda, coulda, shoulda. What would I come back as? I think I'd want to come back as a gentle human being. I'd adopt a dog from a shelter and be nice to it and to everyone else. Oh, that's just a silly fairy tale. I think I'll just try to find me an old deer. Anyway, that's an old wolf talks to us. Coming toward the end, next story is called Unhinged. On March 11th, 2011, in his cottage on a remote part of coastal Sendai, Japan, old Hitoshi was as usual sorting stamps. Each had been placed in priority order in a glass tower. Each time he wanted to review one, he pushed a button and the next one released. He only bought mint, never hinged stamps, but additionally they had to be color precisely as in the catalog, no fading, and of course no stains, crisp printing, any waviness is the result of the stamp having been printed using worn plates, no creases, no inclusions in the paper stock, equal-sized margins, all perforations intact, each of equal length, none bent, no dents in the stamp, for example from the perforation machine, perfect gum, fully and evenly covering the stamp's back. Hitoshi estimated that he had evaluated 3 million stamps. He never touched a stamp with his fingers to avoid his skin oils touching the stamps and increasing risk of creasing a corner. Instead, he used special stamp tongs. While such tongs were available for a few dollars, he chose to spend $300 to get a custom-made one to perfectly fit his fingers, shaped into a semi-rounded spade shape. With one end a little slimmer, the insides polished with ultra-fine steel wool and then plated in medical-quality stainless steel to ensure smoothness. Perhaps not surprising, Hitoshi was as careful with everything. Because Japan is subject to earthquakes, everything was quake-proof down to each cup in his cupboard, which were spring attached to the wall. He takes a pill 3 times a day, so he carried a timer around with him at all times set to go off at precisely 10, 5, and 12. Because he hated noise, he triple-glazed and soundproofed his house using special material he imported from Germany, super insulation in the ceiling crawl space, and soundproofing strips around every window and door. Suddenly, his normally pacific old Akita dog, Daisuke, which means great helper, pawed his arthritic paw against Hitoshi. Moments later, the cottage started to shake, scattering all the stamps onto the floor. Hitoshi glanced over to the stamps, but decided to put Daisuke on a leash, and the two of them limped under the mattress, above the box spring, the safest place in his house, something he had carefully selected years earlier. When the shaking stopped, Hitoshi carefully left the bed, smoothed the bed's comforter, and let Daisuke off the leash. He returned to his stamps and methodically began replacing the stamps in priority order. Minutes later, Daisuke started limping toward the window more quickly than usual and barking at its curtain. Hitoshi carefully rose from his table so the stamps wouldn't be disturbed and tiptoed to the window, taking care not to step on any of the cracks between the floor tiles. When Hitoshi arrived at the window, he carefully pulled back each of the two curtain panels so the symmetry was retained. Before he even got a quarter of the way, he saw a tsunami wave just yards from his house. He'd have only seconds before it invaded his cottage. That moved even the deliberative Hitoshi into action. He raised the first of his 17 4-inch thick stamp albums to the highest shelf, but then the wall of water crashed the door and swept Hitoshi, Daisuke, and the stamp tower to the floor. The next victims were the stamp albums, each filled with thousands of rare mint, never hinged, and otherwise perfect stamps, each protected by its own plastic sleeve. Two more waves, each smaller but still reaching the cottage, fortunately did little additional damage, and then it stopped and the water started to slowly drain. Hitoshi could merely stare and didn't notice Daisuke convulsing on the floor behind him until the dog uttered a faint groan. He bent down to his Daisuke, petting her to try to stop the convulsions, but they wouldn't stop. Hitoshi picked up the phone to call the vet, but the earthquake and tsunami had knocked out phone service. He put Daisuke on the leash, but she would not move, so he carried the 40-pound dog into the car, but the waterlogged vehicle would not start. Hitoshi removed Daisuke and tried to get her to walk with him toward the vet's home office a mile away. But the dog would not move, so Hitoshi carried the still convulsing dog. Every half minute the old Hitoshi would have to stop, put Daisuke down, and try to get her to walk, but to no avail. After a half mile, Daisuke died. Hitoshi stared at his only friend, cried, turned around, and trudged back to his cottage. Then he noticed the only house on the way home, a shack which appeared destroyed by the tsunami. He plodded there as fast as he could limp. He knocked. No one answered. He nursed the askew door and heard moaning. An old woman was trapped under a timber. Her head was bleeding profusely, her skin pale, eyes vacant. Abandoning his usual meticulousness, he grabbed the only piece of cloth he could see that wasn't ocean-soaked and pressed it against the mortal wound. He tried to lift the timber off her to no avail. He said, "I'll get help." "No," she replied weakly. He continued to the door. "No, please, I was done before. This just helps." He turned to her, and she held out her hand. He took it. Then there was silence for what must have been a minute. "It's no longer fun." He nodded. "I'd paint for a bit, dance for a bit, grow flowers for a bit, flirt for a bit. Well, more than a bit." He smiled. "I worked some too, helping orphans find homes, setting up museum exhibits, even running a geisha house. Have you lived well?" And she died. He stared at her, covered her head, bowed and padded out and back toward his cottage. There he mailed, unsorted, a handful at a time, his now damaged stamps to the people who still value them, his beginning stamp collector customers. Then he strode to his medicine cabinet, not caring whether he stepped on a gap between the tiles, and opened the bottle of the OCD medication he had heretofore refused to take. Next he began cleaning his cottage adequately but not perfectly. His furrowed brow relaxed. And I think this is the last one. It's called "This Old Fart Can't Embrace the New Normal." I can't begin to embrace the new normal. Everything is we, not me, the community, all in, together, the collective. Do people not remember we tried that and every communist country dropped it as soon as they could, except Cuba and Venezuela? Young people, do you want that? Much drive comes from the individual, which is increasingly devalued in our collaboration first world. The new normal, at least here in the Bay Area, seems like a fight to look as ugly and unisex as possible. Loose-fitting gray and black and coarse fibers. Is there no room anymore for beauty, for sexuality? Or is the new sexuality tattoos, piercing, and non-binaryism? So many of the self-proclaimed inclusive and tolerant are exclusive and intolerant. For example, my good friend, a normally pacific, conspicuously gay guy, said that if he could, he'd kill Trump. And most people, at least here in the Bay Area, hate everything about Trump, even if they can name only one or two of his policies, let alone analyze their pros and cons. Keying, even burning Teslas has transformed from vandalism to heroism since Musk revealed his conversion from liberal to libertarian. Keep your promises has become atavistic, merely the stuff Grandpa believed in. The new normal is that a broken promise or ghosting warrants no more than a shrug. Even my most revered value, the pursuit of excellence, is increasingly denigrated as a mere white male Eurocentric value. What a headshaker. Excellence, virtuosity, is what spawned everything from the birth control pill to Queen. Instead, the new normal reveres laziness, buried behind words like work-life balance. The average full-time office worker actually works just 2 hours and 53 minutes a day. Yet they seem to find plenty of time to waste on excessive exercise, hiking, meditation, yoga, screen watching, video games, smoking weed, and giggling while holding a "Fuck Trump" sign. The new normal is a tidal wave, and per the Serenity Prayer, we must know what we can and can't change. Or per the song The Gambler, you gotta know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em. I fold. Anyway, those are some of my more poignant stories from my many books. All of them are on Amazon. Just search on my name, Marty Nemko. You'll find all you can stomach. And I like to end these. This will be a podcast for those who want to listen to it through your podcatcher. Anyway, I like to end with a quote from somebody else, which I do believe is more relevant today than ever. It's from Frank A. Clark, and it's, "We find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't."